Hi, Armando Roman here with Christina Noyes, an attorney with the law firm of Spencer Fane. Christina, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Fantastic, fantastic. Christina, your expertise, of course, in the legal space is all about franchising, both the franchisor, who is the one who creates this great business and this model and now wants to take it to the world, like a McDonald's or something, and then also for the franchisee, the person who wants to buy a McDonald's franchise on their neighborhood corner. So today we're going to talk about that franchisee who has never bought a franchise before, doesn't really know what he or she doesn't know. And I'll ask you questions about that so that all those people who want to get their own business and they want to go the franchise model or they're thinking about buying a franchise, this will be designed, this conversation, to help them understand more before they take that leap. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Great, great. So as you've
Let me adjust my camera here just for a second. There you go. I'm sitting up straight.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. That is better. So let me ask you, when people have not had a business before and they think about buying a franchise, what they think they're buying is a business model that will not guarantee them success, but help them be more likely to be successful because they're getting the whole cookbook, the whole recipe for a successful business. And is that how you think that, they're viewing that as well?
I think so. And I think that's one of the reasons why I am so pro on franchising and why franchising as a model has lasted for so long. The International Franchise Association says that 92% of franchisees remain in business after the first year. And that is unlike only 20% of the individually owned new businesses that would start up. So there is definitely a much more ability to be successful when you make the investment into a franchise because somebody has really given it a lot of thought before, not only as a founder model, but and then they've sold it usually to several, if not multiple franchisees who have made this model work in different environments, different states. So it really does help to take the risk out. And of course, you can never eliminate all business risk,
Right.
right? You never can, and there's no promises or guarantees, but it definitely gives somebody a much needed leg up in expanding into really working for themselves with some guardrails and a lot of systems in place that somebody has already road tested and thought of.
I like what you said, a system in place, their own business with guardrails to help them stay a little more on track, because somebody else has already developed this whole franchise model. Um, when somebody's brand new doing it, going to go through a franchise and buy a franchise, they don't know what they don't know. And there's often fear of the unknown. They don't know what can go wrong. What are some of the things as they're thinking of walking down this path, some of those things that they need to be aware of that could go wrong that you can certainly help give them some guidance and help on to help them make that right decision for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talk a lot to incoming people that are thinking of this business model, as you mentioned before. And, I'm always kind of telling them is, a franchising is has both risk and opportunity. One of the things I said, is you are going to have to be very entrepreneurial minded. You are now running your own shop. This is you. And to the extent that you need help, you cannot, and to the extent that, it's really hard for one person to be everything to everybody. Can you be the entrepreneur? Can you be the back office? Can you be the closer? Can you be the masseuse? Can you be the hair cutter? Whatever you don't have, that's fine. Not one person is going to have everything for everybody, but you're going to really need to think about who you are as a person, where your strengths are, and then be able to hire somebody, maybe not full time, but even part time, to kind of help you round that business out and help you with your business. And that could be a spouse, that could be a child, somebody in the family, that could be somebody who's working part time through college, even or even somebody in a paralegal. Somebody, if you're not great at contracts, you can hire somebody going through paralegal school that's detail oriented. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things that, you need to kind of give that forefront that I recommend.
Okay.
The other thing also is, when you're coming in and you're usually changing business models, you don't know, like you said, you don't know what you don't want to know, right? So, the best option here is to do one at a time. And I think that's always, the franchisor is always going to try to get somebody to do more than one. And they're
Okay.
going to try to do a hard sell, just like anytime you buy a house, you need to buy it because somebody's interested in it. They're always going to try to tell you, hey, buy a 3-pack, you're going to get a bigger territory, you're going to be able to expand. And I'm always really trying to tell people, hey, everybody wants you to succeed. The franchise wants to succeed. You want to succeed, but you're not going to know until you've been at least 1 year in this business operating. So don't tie your hands. Do one at a time. Always do one at a time. Have that flexibility to expand when you want to expand, not when somebody is telling you that they want you to expand.
Okay. So Christina, if I can just paraphrase a bit, I think what you were just saying to the audience is when you go to buy into a franchise, they might say, hey, why don't you just buy 3 of them? We've got 3 right here, all in the same general area. Buy
Right.
those 3. We'll give you a good deal now. And when you're saying is, no, hold off a bit. Let's start with 1.
Start
Let's
with
get
one.
that 1
Right.
down, understand it, get your cash flow working. Don't spread yourself too thin. And with that 1, let them prove it to themselves, and then they can expand if they want to.
Exactly. Because oftentimes a franchisor will bundle this together and say, hey, we're going to give you $15,000 off the initial franchise fee for your second, maybe even cut it in half for your third. And when you're
Ah,
looking at the numbers, hey, you're thinking, hey, I can save $25,000. That seems like a great deal. But I always tell people it's not worth doing until you really know for sure.
yeah.
And maybe you need that 25,000 for a marketing, for an expansion, for an upgrade that you want to do. Let's not tie your hands, and let's be very, very strategic about your business and your expansion.
Okay, good. And I remember you said before that it used to be that you mentioned private equity before that they like to buy now smaller companies. And I think as people are starting with a brand new franchise and they're going to buy a franchise, a McDonald's or some other something, they're learning. And that learning curve can sometimes be pretty steep depending on who that person is and what they're doing. So I've got a lot of questions I want to ask, but I guess I'll focus more on one of them. Um, in that franchise agreement, those are big legal documents written by lawyers to protect the franchisor, not so
Great
much the
lawyers.
franchisee. Lawyers are worth their money in gold. So if I'm a brand new somebody who wants to buy a franchise location, and I'm coming to you, and now I see this 50-page document that the franchisor gave me. I don't know what it says. I don't
Right.
know what to look for. I don't know what I need to be, what carries with it a red flag, or what is kind of normal, kind of plain Jane language. But that's where I would say I need to talk with you so that you can tell me what matters and you can look for the things that really are going to protect me, the franchisor. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that breaks my heart in the legal field is when I get existing franchisees that come to me and say, I didn't realize that I couldn't sell this out of the system. I didn't realize that I have a non-compete and now my spouse is bound because I didn't realize how broad it was. Even
Uh,
though the language is there, things, or I didn't realize X or Y. And, it's why we do have some ways to help people exit systems and negotiate. And I do that all day long and have done. It's much easier mentally and heart-wise when you can talk to somebody and say, okay, this is how this is set up. And what I think I try to bring to the table with my franchisees is really kind of a business sense of, you can I can interpret the legal documents, but I can also tell you how this typically plays out in a system um, going forward. Because the franchise agreements and the franchise disclosure documents usually at least 250 pages. The franchise agreement is at least 100, usually. If it's not more than 25 pages, there's a problem. They haven't thought it through, for that. But I can really kind of help, guide and develop the questions that somebody could say, is this the system for you? This is what works. These are the questions you should ask other franchisees who have been in the system. Because as I started to say, a franchise agreement is set up for 10, 15 years. So it's very broad in that it reserves, except for fees, it reserves broad rights for the franchisor to do almost anything. And you really kind of have to balance the need of, yes, it says this. This is what usually happens in practice. These are the questions you need to ask existing franchisees. Are they doing this or not? How are they like, for example, the advertising fund? Franchisors almost always have a fund which they ask their franchisees to contribute 1 to 3% of their gross sales and give it to the franchisor to use. But because this is a 10-year agreement, those provisions for the advertising fund are, we get to do anything we want all the time with all your money, and you can't. And if you're not a franchise lawyer and you're a business lawyer and you look at that, you're like, what in the world? Why would you sign this? And the answer is, well, yes and no. You do have those rights, but most franchisors do really to make a good effort to use that for their website, to use that for search engine optimization, to use that for the glossy flossy materials, to use that for radio ads that you could never pay for to the point. But even all the systems do it differently. So that's like a question where if you just look at the agreement, you would never see that money. If you then ask the franchisees, hey, how are they using it? What do they say they're using it on? Are they getting the benefit of it? And in some systems, they may not get the benefit of it, but in a lot of systems, you will get the benefit of it. You just need to ask how and why.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what you said is that say if I want to buy a McDonald's, that I should talk with other people who own McDonald's today to ask those kinds of questions. Is that right?
That's correct. But you have to be very targeted, right? Because all those people that are current franchisees, they are exactly where you've been. They are busy and up to their eyeballs running their own business. And they have probably 10, 15 minutes to talk to you. And you may even have to like send them a Starbucks card, say, please, here's $25. Please talk to me. Because they are getting calls day in, day out from a whole bunch of people. So, that's one of the areas that we walk through is kind of, let's come up with our questions list and let's be very strategic. And maybe you ask a couple people about advertising, you ask a couple people about expansion, you ask a couple people about different, and say, I promise I'm going to spend only 10, 15 minutes of your time, because truly, most business owners don't have more than 10 or 15 minutes, right?
Right. No, that makes sense. You also made a distinction a moment ago about a business attorney versus someone like you who really understands and eats, lives, and breathes franchise. And a business attorney who does not deal with many franchises or franchisees or any franchise anything wouldn't know what to look for in that 250-page document, but you do.
Right. And I love business attorneys, and they're very good. And somebody's business attorney that has worked with them for years, I completely understand the trust. But if you are a business attorney and you look at this very specific, narrow contract, most business attorneys over-focus on the restrictions, and they don't drill down to the couple of areas that you actually may have some flexibility in it, and they don't really know how it's going to play out over time.
Yeah.
So I think all my franchisees have been very happy with the business advice that I've been able to give them.
Yeah, and that makes sense that when you're going to buy something specific or do something specific, get the industry expert who really understands that space, and you're going to have a better outcome.
I think so. Especially, and I represent sometimes franchisors, and I will deal with a business attorney who will call me up and say, I don't understand this. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Let me explain it.
But that makes sense why you want to have a specialist on board for your team there. What are some of the common things that as you're talking with that person who's going to buy a franchise, some of the common things that you hear from them that you help explain to them and help them understand?
Right. Obviously everybody always focuses on fees, which is great. But usually, the fee structure, it is most important, but it's also fairly well stated in a franchise agreement. So when we're doing it, we focus on operations, and then we focus on kind of the three T's: transfer, termination, and the term or the renewal.
Okay.
And everybody's really surprised to think, oh, I'm just getting into this. Why should I talk about getting out of it? Um, right? But it is important because, who knows what your situation may come to. And these are very strong terms that if you have any wiggle room in them, you have them up front and you can plan for them up front. And also, they could technically affect you. 10 years comes by at a drop of a hat. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. There's an expression, start with the end in mind.
Mhm.
And when you start this and you plan to own it for 20 years, you're not really thinking about that exit 20 years later. But it does matter. And that legal agreement they're signing now today, with you helping guide them, it will make a big difference for them when they want to sell in 20 years. Or if there's a health issue in 5 years and they need to get out, well, got to be able to do that if you need to.
Exactly, exactly. And who knows? I mean, if you love this concept and you can expand, there are private equity groups that are coming in for, locations that have 5, 6, 7 locations, and they're interested in it. And you kind of want to be able to speak to that up front when that person, comes by and kind of asks you about it. So it is kind of important to plan for all aspects of it.
Yeah, and a question for you, Christina. McDonald's is probably one of the most well-known franchises out there that is now a very expensive franchise to buy into. But there are franchises for all kinds of stuff, right? Not just hamburgers, but all kinds of stuff.
Pretty much, yes. It's almost like if there is a business model that can be run without the one-on-one person, it can be franchised. And so I really kind of tell people to, think about what you like doing every day and see if there's a franchise, because that is something as a business owner, um, if your employee calls out, you're the one stepping in. You're the one on call. And it doesn't matter whether it's a marketing call or a front office call or a billing, you're the one who's stepping into it. So you do have to have some sort of, I won't say passion for a business, some sort of liking. You're going to have to like this business because you are going to be living and breathing it for a while.
Right, definitely. It's going to go for a long time, hopefully. So I've got a bunch of questions I want to ask you. And one of the questions I like to ask you is one of the things that we promote quite a bit is just protecting the family, protecting the business, and doing what you can to protect yourself whenever you do anything, anything really. And obviously buying a franchise location somewhere is a whole new thing for a person to do. And that might be their very exciting thing that they want to get done, and they just want to get it done, and they might ignore some of the details that they shouldn't ignore. But
Mhm.
how should they proceed in a way that helps to protect them and their family as they begin to walk down this path of buying a franchise, choosing the right one, and then getting that launched?
Right, absolutely. Well, that is one thing that we do talk about. So I think when people go to buy a franchise, they're educated enough to understand there's they want to form an entity that has limited liability, a limited liability company, which is great. Absolutely, they need to. And that protects you from the customers. But what I do also remind everybody is you're all dealing with sophisticated people here. So you are going to be asked as a franchisee to sign a personal guarantee. And your spouse will have to sign that personal guarantee too. And you will be asked to get one from the franchisor and the landlord and the bank. So, that is kind of a mindset that I think a lot of people are like, well, I'm just going to form a limited liability company and then I'll be protected. And that only protects you from third-party customers if there's a problem. So what I usually try to recommend people is let's do some estate planning early. Let's do some thoughts early. Let's fund your 529 plans for your kids now. let's, if you've got some extra money, put that away now.
Yeah.
Let's, make sure you've got your 401k money. There is a business model where people are funding their franchises with their 401k money. And that's fine. But I always tell them, are you sure you want to do that? Because that is really protecting you from your retirement. Or if you do it, maybe you shouldn't do all of your 401k money, right? Maybe you do part of your 401k money and you save your 401k money and invest it, really, because that's money that's investing over time as well, for that. My other recommendation is there's a tendency for this to be a whole family affair for both spouses to work it. I always say, hey, if you can keep one spouse working a regular job, it's going to be much easier, because there are times when cash flow goes up and down, and it's just going to be, and also from your own feeling of, are all of your eggs in one basket?
Right.
It's going to be much better if you're going to have at least somebody else, another basket to work on.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned in what you just said, estate planning. You talked about 529s, you talked about 401k, you talked about a lot, but what I heard you say is look at the big picture for that family. And do you really want to put all of your eggs in one basket? Because if this one basket fails, well, that can really devastate the family. But as you said, if one spouse is working outside the business, there's still some family income coming in. If you fund those 529s now, well, you've already got a good chunk put away now for the kids for college. If you've got the estate documents set up properly, then you've protected yourself somewhat from things that could go wrong with this business or from someone suing the business entity as well. But you put that in the context, Christina, of in the bigger picture, how do we protect that family? Yes, you want to have your own business, love it, fantastic. Want to have a franchise, great. But let's not forget what really matters to people is that family and protecting that family so that you can accomplish all that you want to accomplish.
Exactly. It just takes a little bit of planning on the forefront.
Yep, exactly. Fantastic. So again, I've got a lot of questions. I want to make sure I don't jump around too much here, though. Are there things that people get in? Let's say you've helped somebody walk through this path. They said, yes, I want to do it. You've covered all the bases, helped them get the estate planning, the entity set up. And now it's day one, they launch. And now they're a few months into this and they're now working their fingers to the bone. It's taking a lot more time than they thought. Cash flow is maybe a lot tighter than they were expecting. And now they're as human nature is, they're kind of second guessing themselves. Did I make the right decision or not? And obviously in the planning that you do with them ahead of time, you want to think about some of those contingencies and a plan B, et cetera, and protect them and give them that option if they can. But I imagine in those franchise agreements, I imagine they've had good lawyers draft those for them. And so the franchisor has protected themselves as much as possible. But in that case, if the person gets in the franchise, buys it, and then decides they want to get out, how does that exit? What options do they typically have when they come to that conclusion?
Come to the conclusion. So when I talk to, that's one of the reasons why we talk about the termination and the transfer, right? And I will tell most of my franchisees that call to say, one, don't panic in the first 4 months. Right. So part of our initial conversation is save your money, be conservative, don't overspend in marketing, don't overhire people. Right. I had somebody who in 4 months, he's like, I've gone through my money. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, I just want to do marketing. So I hired 10 staff people. I'm like, you have 5 clients a week. You can't be paying 6 masseuses, 2 head staff people, and yourself.
Yeah.
You need to be very efficient. So I always tell people, don't expand, take the minimum space, save your money, overestimate the initial investment by 25%, all that. And then don't panic, the first, because it is probably going to plan for it to take twice as long as you might think to be in the black, right? So you really do need to plan that it's going to take longer to ramp up. If they say it's going to 6 months, double it for 12 and make sure you've you've penciled out the numbers for twice as much and an additional 25%. But assuming that, once you've gotten into it and it's been, I tell everybody, you should probably give it at least a year, right? You should have enough money to last at least a year. I prefer 18 months for this. Do you have that funding? If you don't, then you might want to take a different job, a salary job, and save that money so that you have it, because you don't want to lose what you've put in. But assuming that, the best is always going to be to sell, to somehow sell to somebody else who can come in with more money to, do what you've been doing, right? I'm assuming that you've taken, you've started the business, and therefore you've probably used up a lot of money in construction costs or expanding or time or energy, right? So the best thing to do is to sell. Now, you will need to realize that you will have to sell within the system, right? Most franchisors are not going to let you sell to a co-branded or a different brand. But on the other hand, you have a lot of, just for the same reasons you bought this franchise, you have a lot of people who would be interested in the name. And so it's easier to sell a franchise than it is to sell an independent business that people don't know. So that is always something to do. And it is going to be important to, book all your revenue, you restaurant owners, and to show what this company really can do, with the income that you are making, because it is kind of a shame to just close the franchise without getting something, for all your effort.
Yeah, and I'll touch on just what you said there about cash flow. When I think about cash flow for a brand new business, like a brand new franchisee is going to acquire a location and build it out and now open up their doors, I think about projections, cash flow projections, and projections are a forecast, but they're not guaranteed. You don't know what revenue really is going to be. All the costs always show up that you didn't expect, but having projections to help get an idea what cash will be needed, making sure, as you said, there's cash that they've saved up that they can burn through, because they will burn through cash when they first open up that location, even before they open their doors for business, as they've got to build it out and spend money to build out that whole location, and then making sure they've got that cash reserve. But then also, if they can establish some kind of a line of credit or something where they can tap into if they need it, because they've got to have these layers of these layers built in to get them through that startup stage to the point where cash flow is now covering the expenses of that business. And for new business owners who haven't gone through this before, this might be a big surprise, or they might think, well, yeah, I opened up a McDonald's, but the customers didn't show up. Well, they didn't know you were open for business yet. You're a brand new location, which gets me to another question. Sometimes people will start a brand new location from scratch and do the build out, as you said. Sometimes they want to buy somebody else's location that is already a functioning business. And those are two different ways to get to the same place. What are your thoughts on, one versus the other?
Right. There is definitely some high advantages to buying an operating business. You can really kick the tires. You can see there's a lot less build out costs. I mean, if you take your war chest, you're not going to be paying the construction people. You're not going to be paying the contractors. You're not going to be paying for all the build outs and everything else like that. So that is definitely a higher benefit. You can also kind of see you come in with established customers. So your ramp up time is less. Instead of having, a 12-month ramp up time, you can buy a business, especially if it's been up for 18 months, that has at least enough cash flow coming in that you can take it to the next level. The downside, though, is you really do need to be, I won't say skeptical, but you need to look at that business and say, really, why are they selling? And can I make a difference? If the reason they're selling is maybe they've opened it for 5-10 years and they have a health event, or they're, maybe they spent all their money on this brand new expensive build out and they're just kind of don't have it, you can come in with new money. If they're retiring, that's great. If there's been a change in health circumstances, for it. A lot of the franchises are built with executives that are looking for that, 5-10 year window before retirement. And who knows? There's new grandbabies, and they're like, I want to be out of here. I want to see them. I want to relocate. All expansion. You have to be very careful though to make sure that the location they're interested in is a good location, because you can't change. You are buying that location, and you don't want to. If there's something wrong with that location, if customers don't like turning right, they only like to turn, they want to turn right and they don't want to turn left, or it's hidden behind something else, or if there's something scary that's just gone down the road, you want to make sure that the location you buy is technically good. And that does require, asking some digging questions of the franchisor, like, what do they think of this location? Did the franchise, they approved it, but did the franchisee actually listen to the franchisor in selecting this location? Right. And, is it a good place where you as a consumer feel safe, feel warm, feel welcome, and would you go there? And if the answer is not yes to all of those questions, then you need to be looking at a different location, even if it's within the same system.
Yeah, with what you just said, Christina, it reminds me. I remember hearing about a Dunkin' Donuts that was on the wrong side of the street.
Yes.
Because Dunkin' Donuts is a coffee place, a morning place, a get your sweet Danish and your hot coffee and then go to work. But they had put this location on the wrong side of the street. So people come, say, from outskirts into downtown in the morning, and they want to make a right-hand turn to get into Dunkin' Donuts. They don't want to make a left and cross traffic. It's just too much work. So they put
And
the Dunkin'
they'll
Donuts.
go one block down because it's the wrong, the
Right.
wrong location.
It
So
was on the wrong for the traffic flow, and that it was the wrong subject. Another thing you mentioned though as well is why? Why are they selling? Is there something wrong? Is there maybe a rezoning that happened? Is there maybe a competitor coming in very close to you? Why are they selling? And if it, as you said, makes sense, like a retirement coming up or a health issue, well, that makes sense. That's reasonable, logical.
or even cost overruns. They overspent. They, the cost build outs. That is a very reasonable. So many people get into it. The contractors promise you it'll be 200,000 and it's 500,000. You spend an extra 300,000 on building it out. That is your money to operate, and you do not have any more time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're out of time and you're out of funds, which is why we talked about budget planning and planning for the excess.
And you also mentioned, I'll get back to cash flow and accounting, because you said report all the income. In the cash business, sometimes that cash goes straight from the customer's hands into the owner's pocket and never goes through the cash register, does not get through the accounting records, does not get filed for tax purposes, and a lot of things wrong with that picture. But
Yes.
when all of the income is reported as it is supposed to be and included on tax returns, then whoever buys that business next can look at those tax returns and see the real accurate numbers, which of course matters quite a bit. And it also gets to the accounting, having good accounting records, because that next buyer or whoever's going to buy your franchise from you, they want to see good, clean accounting records, everything reported. And there's always this dilemma when a business owner is trying to, or it comes time to file taxes. Business owner always wants to pay less taxes.
Yes.
And so they work with their tax CPA often to bring that tax bill down and maybe put some gray area expenses into the business that, do they belong there or not? Well, that's a gray area.
That is a gray area. And that's something where, that's part of the planning when you do put your franchise business for sale. You can say, okay, here are our returns. These are the adjustments that we have personally taken that you may not want to. We have taken X out for owner distributions. Aunt Tilly's on the payroll. Our teenage son is working here. He's doing the marketing. Is he worth $70,000 a year? He's a college kid. Probably not. However, you can always have the ability to call those specific things out. And any incoming buyer, they're going to be doing the same thing. So they're not going to look bad at you. But if the dollars are not there in the first place, it's really hard to say, well, if I had made 500,000 in sales, then it would be X. Especially, and then of course you don't want to be sideways with the tax person, the franchisor.
Right.
And it's also kind of really hard because a lot of franchisors now, the POS system, the point of sale system, is so set, you really can't anymore. And there's
Yeah.
videos, and you just don't even want to do it. But I always have to kind of like, don't do it for my restaurant owners.
Well, restaurants
I
and
love restaurants, but yes, don't do it.
there are some industries that lend themselves to certain things.
There are.
Good. So what have we not touched on yet, Christina, in this conversation for that new franchisee who's thinking they want to do this and go forward? What have we not touched on yet in this conversation?
Um, let's see. I think, for me is just, again, I think we've hit on getting to an attorney like myself or somebody else who knows the franchising. They will help you develop a list of questions that you can ask before diligence day. And you can ask the franchisor, and you can really go on. If I can get to my franchisees before they have that day with the franchisor, they've all come back and said, I'm listening more carefully, I'm paying more attention, and I can tell when they're skipping over something, and I can ask those pointed questions. And they all say they're a little startled when I ask, so how does this really work? But they have an answer for them, for that. So
Yeah,
I think that's, something else to be considered.
I
And then the
love.
other thing I wanted to talk about is just non-competes. Um, if you want to exit this business, all franchisors are going to say, hey, you cannot continue to compete in this business in this location for a certain amount of time. And we have been successful sometimes in clarifying that up front for an incoming franchisee to say, hey, you know what? I'm doing a salon suite business. My spouse is a hairdresser. They're going to be bringing their customers, but you know what? They need to be able to leave. And those customers need to be able to leave with them if we get divorced or if something happens. So that's something that's much easier, that exclusion, to say, hey, we're going to say up front, this is not part of the non-compete. These individual people that you are bringing into it. And all franchisors are going to be very easier to say that up front than when you're trying to exit the system.
Yeah, I like what you said. You said that when you have that consultation with the person who's going to buy this franchise before they go to the franchisor,
Mhm.
you've coached them up. You've told them what questions to ask, very specific questions to ask. So if they're brand new in this, the time they get with you ahead of time before they go see the franchisor, I can see where that can make a tremendous difference. And it puts the franchisor on notice that, hey, these are not country bumpkins out of the blue, not knowing what the heck they're doing. They've got some expert counsel, they've got some guidance, and they're going to be a little prepared than somebody who has not had that time, say, with you.
Right. And if they get with a business attorney, the business attorney may be saying, hey, you need to change X and Y and Z. And I will tell you, the franchisor is just going to roll their eyes and say, no franchise system in the world is going to change this without certain reasons. So, you do have that level of knowledge and respect, I think, that you need, because it is expanding into a business, and this is going to be your baby and your expertise.
Right, exactly. And for people who've never run a business before, not operated a business before, maybe they were a corporate executive for some company, and now they're running a business. They don't know what they don't know, but they've obviously got to manage cash flow, get good accounting, get good finances,
Right.
get a good accounting person or bookkeeper, get a good tax accountant to make sure those books are nice and clean, get a good business lawyer to get the entity set up, get the right insurance on the business, insurance on the employees, employment agreements if need be. There's a whole lot that is there once they once they clear the hurdles with you, there's still a whole business to run that they've
Yes.
never operated before. And you're part of a big team of attorneys, and you've got a lot of good expertise that could come in to help them with some of those as well. Like you mentioned estate planning a moment ago,
Right.
that is just so important to get done as part of all of this planning.
It is. And we tend to help, I'm very upfront with I said, I'm the franchise stop, next stop is, forming your entity and getting your estate planning done. And, and I say, you may need our help with employment agreements. You may need our help with employee manuals. We frequently review the leases. because the leases all have amendments that the franchisor requires that you have to go back to your franchise landlord and get done. So we're frequently working with our franchisees on the landlords that happen, and then sometimes, the vendor contracts. So, when I talk to my franchisees, I really hope and expect that I am continuing to work with them on their business. And then, in 2 or 3 years, often they call back and say, I've got another one. I've got another one, which is really fun to see that they're expanding every couple years in the same system.
Yeah. And Christina, with the franchisees that you're helping, is it often a couple buying one location? Is it one person buying one location, or is it two partners, two business partners who want to come together in a business and now they are buying a location?
Yeah. Usually it is one person, one of a couple that is buying it, that is doing it. I do often represent two people that are coming together to buy a franchise. But essentially that also, it's like a marriage.
Right.
And you really, you
Right.
really have to know that person well, and you really have to get along with them. And you have to have, not just get along with them on a social basis, but you have to have the same goals and strategies and a good way of communicating. So, you almost need to send them to their own therapy session beforehand, like premarital counseling, pre-business counseling of, hey, can you work it out? But I have had several really close friends that have done very well with each other, for it. But again, just in case it doesn't, you do have to also watch out and have that agreement, kind of like a prenuptial agreement now.
Right.
You have that structure of, hey, what do you need to do? We just negotiated one where they had 38% owners, and there was a buyback clause to say, hey, if we're in a deadlock, you buy me out or I buy you out, and one of us is done. And we just literally, closed that deal last week. So it is very important to have that structure up front when you're dealing with partners.
Yeah.
So that you can understand and have the ways around in case you do have a deadlock.
Yep, absolutely. And that makes me think about an operating agreement or a partnership agreement.
Mhm.
And is that where you would put that
Yes.
terminology in and build those things in?
Yes, absolutely. So, and if somebody already comes to us with an operating agreement, it's an amendment that you have. And it's sometimes called there's various different ways to buy back and a reverse offer. But it's worth thinking about that now and having everybody agree, because if you get to that deadlock position, you're not happy with each other and nobody's agreeing, even when it makes sense to agree, you don't want to agree.
Well,
Because you're
right,
mad. So
right.
it's best to have that done up front, and it just goes much smoother. When you've already given some thought to, hey, how would you break this up? Is somebody completely out? Do they get to take half the clients? Do they get to take do they co-own the copyrights together that they might have done? Who owns the advertising? Can they compete against each other in the same field? Can they buy the next franchise location 3 miles from you and set up
Yeah.
directly against you?
Yeah. All by
Um,
themselves without you.
And, and that's something that is worth giving some thought to now while everybody gets along.
Yep. Yep. I just spoke with a business owner just a couple weeks ago who has two older partners he wants to buy out. They want to retire and go do their own thing. But well, what's the buyout formula? Well, there isn't one. What's the value of the company? Well, we don't know. Well, okay, where's the money going to come from to buy them out? So a lot of unanswered questions that could have been addressed up front and that would have made this so much easier for everybody involved if it had been addressed up front.
Exactly. Exactly. And, again, these are hard decisions, but on a lot of ways, when you go into business for yourself, you are stepping in to make the hard decisions.
Right.
You are, that is part of your responsibility of the owner, is to make those calls. And if it's too tough for you to make those calls now, you may want to think about, hey, maybe I do want to only be an employee someplace else. Maybe I just want to do the work and I don't really want to make the tough calls. It's a difference between being a niece, having a niece, or having your own children. Which one do you want to do? Do you want to play with them and send them back, or do you want to be responsible for something else and, hold the line.
Right, right. And I imagine that there are times when a new franchisee, buys a location, gets that set up and going, it's working great, but they realize that it is all consuming. They're working 6, 7 days a week, and that is not what they thought they were going to be doing.
Mhm.
So when that becomes a situation, they've got to have a way out. What is
Right.
that way out? Is it selling to their neighbor, to back to the franchisor, or what are their options? Because they just don't know what they're getting into. Even if they've done all the homework they need to, there are
Right.
still surprises along the way, and it just might not be what they really want long term for themselves and their family.
That's very true. So in terms of exit strategies and when somebody's overwhelmed like that, you really look and say, hey, can you take a pay cut, or is there any wiggle room in the dollars for you to hire somebody to help relieve you? Is it now time for a second manager? And if it's not time, and if if it's not making enough money for a second manager or somebody else, really, what can you change now to bring it up to that different level, right? So that you do have the flexibility, so that you do have some sort of, I won't say balance, but a little bit of breathing room, in there. And if you do want to then sell, sometimes you can bring in a new partner, right? That is the time where you say, hey, I've got this, but really I need somebody else who's going to really help me leverage this and help me come into it. And then sometimes we have brought in new owners, new investors into an existing location to kind of ramp it up or expand, or continue growing, or even do a different location. And then of course you could also sell it. I think the key for most people, they come to me and they say, I want to sell, I'm really worried about the franchisor. And I tell them, you should be worried about the landlord. Franchisors, if as long as you don't compete against them, you know, rarely will sue you for money. They sometimes will, but assuming that you can keep up with the royalties and you're not too far into them, they're probably not going to spend 50,000 to collect 20,000 in lost royalties. Your landlord will sue you for the remaining part of the lease. It's a very easy thing for them to do. I have seen it. They will do it. So the number one risk for somebody, if you are trying to get out, is making sure somebody can come into that space, or that the landlord will let you out of the space with a pre-penalty payment or something, because you just don't want to go dark on that landlord. They can and will come after you for the remaining part of the lease.
Yeah, well, yeah, interesting. A lot to think about. And the benefits, again, going back to the reason why people want to buy into a franchise, they're buying a brand, they're buying a whole recipe on how to make this work. They're being told where to buy the materials, when to buy them, how to put those together in the shop, what equipment to buy. They're being told pretty much all of this, so they don't have to really think about it, because the franchisor already designed this for that purpose, right?
And I think that does take a lot of the guesswork out of it. It takes a
Yeah.
lot of the time to source those products. Some of the questions we do ask though in terms of sourcing is, where is that sourcing coming from? Are you going to be constantly paying for your shirts to come from New York City if you're based in Nevada? So where are you getting all that equipment? And it does certainly, and that's one of the reasons why I like franchise model is, you're stepping in to hopefully do what you love, which is deal with the customers. Because that is one thing that the franchisor cannot get to you, is the clients or the customers. So you can really focus on the client and the customers, and your own local marketing that you're doing using the franchisor's area. So I think it's going to be very important to remember that while you have, you need to take that time that you would have spent developing it and spend that time on the customers and the
Yeah.
customer experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I spoke with a franchisee recently who was thinking of selling his franchise, that location that he owns, and starting his own business, somewhat similar, but not really similar. So I don't know how that non-compete will or will not play in.
Mhm.
But I mentioned that because him buying a franchise location, running and operating, it gave him a chance to be a business owner, understand what that's like, understand how to do that. And now he wants to take the next step of have his own location, his own business, where it's all him building it out. So I think that's a really nice kind of a stepping stone for some people if they want to go that route?
It can be a stepping stone, but they're going to have to be very careful because, you know, franchisors, they have built this system, they love it, and they are protective of it. So your non-competes, not only do you have a non-compete for a specific time and area and geographic, you have a confidentiality agreement that really says, hey, anything the franchisor gave you, any of those materials, any of those, the manuals, any of that type of thing, you just can't copy and put your own name on it. That is their proprietary information. So really, if you want to take kind of your ideas and your thoughts to do it, you're going to need to move, or you're going to need to re-certificate, or you're going to just need to take 2-3 years and be out of the market. I have a couple franchisees that say, hey, I do it. I'm like, and I told him, I said, is there anything you wanted to do for 2 years? He's like, yeah, I want to write a book. I said, okay, go write your book for 2 years, sell your business, write your book for 2 years, and then compete.
And you're saying 2 years because that's when
That's usually most of the non-competes are 2-3 years. Now, if you sell your business, most people you buy will expect a 5-year non-compete. So you are going to need to be out of the market for a little bit, but you do have to be super careful because obviously if you know, you can't protect an idea unless it's a patented idea, but all the other materials, you really are going to have to start from scratch if you have your own idea, you know, and you do have to be very aware of, it's never worth fighting a non-compete. I will tell you that. Spend your money someplace else.
Yeah, that makes me think about intellectual property, which
Yes.
that franchisor should have protected with an attorney who understands intellectual property, protect the brand, protect the processes, protect everything about that company that is theirs that they created.
Yes, they've created it, they've done it. And a lot of times, most of the franchise agreements say that those customers are their customers. And there is often a non-solicitation provision that says you can't contact those customers for years after you've exited the system. So you do
Yeah.
have to be very careful with that.
Yeah, very, very good advice. And Christina, you've just covered so many bases in so many areas. So I'm very grateful that we had this conversation. Anybody who is thinking about, that person listening who thinks that he or she might want to have their own franchise and buy into a location, they can learn a lot just from hearing your words. And of course, they can reach you as well if they have specific questions for you, want to, hire you or talk with you. What is the best way for someone to reach you if they have questions directly for you?
Yes, well, they can email me. My law firm is called Spencer Fain, and we have a website that has all my contact information. And that has my email. And just send me an email, give me a call. I'm always happy to talk to people.
Oh, fantastic. Christina, thank you so much for doing what you do to help these people get their own business going. I know that you work very hard to protect them and put in those protections they need as they launch this new part of their life. Thank you for that.
Well, I'm happy to talk to anybody, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about this.
Excellent. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.